Mi
Stand
nieto
up.
grito en el
Close the
almuerzo.
tap.
Deja
And
de
if someone
hablar
tells you to stop
tonterías
talking
abuela,
about the past,
pero bloquee su
smile,
mesada. Turn around.
They laughed
and block
at
the
me
door of your life
at my
behind
own
you.
table,
Because the
in
woman
my
who
own
survives
house,
the worst thing
and that
becomes
was the
the
last
most dangerous
mistake they
thing.
ever made.
And that,
My
my dear,
name is
the only
Margarita.
story that
I'm
ever truly
72 years
matters.
old.
And I built everything I have from nothing. From absolute, bone-crushing nothing. When my husband decided a younger woman looked better on his arm, I didn't collapse. I didn't beg. I put on my shoes, walked out that door, and I built an empire. Ferreterias, hardware stores, in a world where men looked at me like I was lost every time I walked onto a construction site. They underestimated me then. My own family underestimated me later. And every single one of them paid for it. But let me take you back to that Sunday. That gray, suffocating Sunday that changed everything. The sky that morning looked like a bruise. Heavy, swollen, waiting to burst. I had been awake since 5 in the morning. My hands, spotted with age and slightly twisted from arthritis, moved through the kitchen with the muscle memory of a woman who has fed her family for decades. I marinated the meat. I peeled the potatoes. I made the sauce from my mother's recipe, the one I had memorized as a little girl standing on a wooden stool beside her stove. I made the 3 leches cake from scratch because my grandson Julian loved it. I did all of this because I believed food was love. I believed that if I just kept giving, kept cooking, kept showing up, they would see me. They would feel me there. I was wrong. When they arrived, the house filled with noise but not warmth. My daughter Clara walked in with her phone pressed to her ear, barely grazing my cheek with a kiss so empty it didn't even make a sound. My son-in-law Roberto collapsed into the couch in front of the television like a man who owned the place. And then came Julian, my grandson, 22 years old, tall, handsome, university student. He walked through my home the way a landlord walks through a property, like I was the tenant who owed him services. "Hey, Grandma," he muttered without looking up from his phone. "My love," I said, smiling, reaching for something real between us. "I made the 3 leches cake you love." "Yeah. Cool," he said, dropping onto the sofa like a sack of bones. We sat at the dining table, the one I bought with the money from my first big deal, 40 years ago. Dark wood. Solid. Built to last, just like me. But the silence at that table was suffocating. Forks clinked against porcelain. Roberto commented on the traffic. Clara mentioned the weather. Nobody looked at each other. I decided to fill the silence with something real. I started talking about one of the stories from my early days in business. The time in 1985 when I had nothing in my pocket but a gold watch my father left me, and I walked into a supplier's office to negotiate a truckload of cement on credit. The man looked at me like I was a joke. "I don't give credit to women," he said. And I placed that watch on his desk and told him it was worth more than his truck, and if I didn't pay him within the week, he could keep it. I worked 20 hours a day that week. I paid him back. I told that story at the table with a smile on my face, because even now, decades later, it still felt like a victory worth remembering. That was when it happened. Julian sighed. Loud. Dramatic. The kind of sigh meant to be heard, meant to wound. He dropped his fork against his plate with a crash that made Roberto flinch. And then he looked up at me, with my own eyes, my same dark eyes, and what I saw in them turned my blood to ice. Contempt. "Grandma, please," he said, and his voice rang through the dining room like a slap. "Stop. Nobody wants to hear these boring old stories. It's always the same thing. Always you and your great achievements. Just be quiet and let us eat in peace." The silence that followed was not ordinary silence. It was the kind that presses on your chest, that steals your breath. I looked at Clara, my daughter. The woman I had carried inside my body, nursed through fevers, paid for her university, her house, her car. I waited for her to stand up, to say something, to defend me. She brought her napkin to her mouth and let out a small, nervous laugh. "Mom, honestly, you do repeat yourself a lot," she said, eyes darting away from mine. The boy is stressed with university. Don't take it personally. And then they laughed. All of them. A soft, conspiratorial laugh. The kind that says, yes, the old woman is a lot. Yes, we humor her. Yes, she is background noise. They laughed at my story. At my struggle. At my dignity. I sat there feeling like I had been struck across the face with an open hand. Something broke inside me in that moment. But it wasn't my heart. My heart has too many scars to break over something like this. What broke was the veil. The beautiful, terrible veil of self-deception that had let me believe these people loved me as much as I loved them. For years I had excused their carelessness, their entitlement, their forgetfulness. Told myself it was youth. Told myself they were busy. Told myself this was how modern families were. That laugh was my answer. I did not cry. Margarita does not cry in public. I felt the heat crawl up my neck. Not shame. Rage. Cold, ancient, calculating rage. I set my napkin on the table. I smoothed the linen with my palm. I stood. The chair scraped against the hardwood floor and cut their laughter short for exactly 1 second. Mom, are you feeling sick? Clara asked, spoon still in hand. I said nothing. I turned and walked toward the hallway. Let her go. She's doing her drama, I heard Julian say behind me. More laughter. Finally some peace and quiet. I walked down the hall past the framed photographs on the wall. Clara's graduation. Julian's baptism. My travels. All of it funded by the boring old stories. All of it built on the back of the woman who was supposed to shut up and serve dessert. I closed my bedroom door behind me with a soft click. That click was the most satisfying sound I had heard in years. I sat in my reading chair by the window and watched the first drops of rain hit the glass, crying the tears I refused to shed. I breathed slowly. The pain in my chest was real, sharp, persistent. But my mind had never been clearer. He said nobody wanted to hear old stories. Fine. If my stories meant nothing, then the money those stories had built should mean nothing to them too. I took my phone from my cardigan pocket. Not the large button phone they assumed I had. A smartphone, the latest model, one I had learned to use by watching tutorials online, because I refused to be left behind. I refused to be anyone's idea of helpless. I opened my banking application. I went to Julian's account first. The one I had set up for him, the one I funded monthly with a sum that exceeded the salary of most working professionals. I looked at the transactions. Sushi restaurants. Designer clothing. Bars on Thursday nights. Gaming subscriptions. The boy is stressed, my daughter had said. Yes. Very stressed, spending my money on weekends. I found the option with the precision of a surgeon. Block card. I held my finger over the button for just 1 moment. Not from hesitation. I was savoring it. I thought about his face at the table. The contempt in those eyes that looked so much like mine. I thought about the gold watch I had pawned at 25 years old to start this empire he was busy mocking. I pressed block. Then I found the recurring transfer, his weekly allowance, scheduled for Monday morning. Cancel recurring transfer. The app asked me to confirm. Are you sure you wish to proceed? More sure than I have ever been in my life, I said quietly to the empty room. Confirmed. I set the phone on my nightstand beside my reading glasses and my rosary. Outside, I could hear them turning on the television for the football match. They were still eating my food, drinking my wine, under my roof, completely unaware that the golden tap had just been shut off. I felt a strange peace settle over me. Not happiness. The stillness that comes before war. They thought I was an old woman who was useful for cooking and signing checks. They were about to discover that Margarita, the woman who negotiated with cement suppliers in 1985, was still very much alive. I slept lightly that night, waking in intervals, but when Monday's grey light pressed through the shutters, I did not feel the usual heaviness of old bones. I felt electricity. I got up, ignored my knee pain, the same knees they thought were falling apart, and went straight to my study. I had not entered that room with serious intent in years. The mahogany shelves, the smell of old paper, this had been my command center once. I sat in the leather chair that creaked beneath me like an old friend saying hello. And then I started digging. I pulled out the thick beige folders from the locked metal filing cabinet. Bank statements. 5 years of them. Page by page, line by line. My reading glasses slipping down my nose while my fingers moved with a focus I had almost forgotten I possessed. What I found made the insult at the dinner table seem like nothing. Clara had come to me 2 years ago with a desperate story. The roof of her house was caving in. She needed emergency funds immediately. I had given her the money without a second thought, because that is what mothers do. But there was no invoice. No contractor receipt. When I cross-referenced the dates against the additional credit card I paid for her each month, I found the transaction. A vacation to Cancun. For 2 people. 1 week after the supposed leak. She had lied to me. She had looked me in the eyes, played helpless, and stolen from me with a smile and a kiss on the cheek. I kept looking. My son-in-law Roberto's car insurance, the one he swore he paid himself from his annual bonus, had been debited from my primary savings account for 3 consecutive years. Buried in the automatic payments. Invisible unless you looked. I looked. And then I found the thing that made my hands go still on the pages. At the bottom of the filing cabinet, inside a blue leather folder, were the power of attorney documents. 10 years ago, after a scare with my blood pressure, Clara had come to me with soft eyes and a gentle voice. "Sign this, Mama," she had said. "It's for emergencies. So I can take care of things if something happens to you. Move you to the hospital. Handle your affairs." I had believed her. I read the document again now with the cold eyes of a woman who had been betrayed too many times to be naive. Acts of domain. That was the legal phrase. It meant Clara could sell my house, my commercial properties, my land, and empty my bank accounts, without my permission, as long as I had not explicitly revoked this power. A chill moved through me like cold water. If Julian's blocked card triggered suspicion, and Clara realized I was cutting the supply, she had the legal weapon to strip me of everything before I could blink. They could declare me senile. They could say I didn't know what I was doing. I needed artillery. I went to my old address book, the red leather one where I wrote numbers in fountain pen, and I found the name I was looking for. Ernesto Valdez. Lawyer. Bulldog face, brilliant mind. Had helped me draft my first ironclad contracts back when suppliers were trying to swindle me with substandard steel. I had not spoken to him in years. I dialed. 3 rings. A young woman answered. Valdez and Associates. "Good morning. I need to speak with Licenciado Ernesto Valdez," I said, and was surprised by the firmness of my own voice. I did not sound like the woman who had served dessert yesterday. I sounded like the boss. "The Licenciado is semi-retired. May I ask who's calling?" "Tell him it's Margarita Lanes. The hardware woman from the north. Tell him I have a problem with concrete that needs to be broken." A pause. Hold music. And then, a rough, tobacco-weathered voice that brought tears of relief to my eyes. "Margarita. God almighty. I thought you'd retired to some Caribbean island or were knitting blankets for grandchildren." "Ernesto," I exhaled. "No islands. No blankets. I'm surrounded by sharks, and the worst part is they have my last name." I told him everything. Not the emotional parts. Ernesto did not care about tears. I gave him numbers. The power of attorney. The financial risk. The timeline. "Margarita," he said, and I heard his voice shift from warmth to strategy in real time. "If that power is still active and your daughter figures out what you're doing, you are sitting on a barrel of gunpowder. You need to come to my office today. We have to revoke that power before the notary offices close." "I'll be there by 6, I said. I put down the phone. Then I went to my wardrobe and I found my old power suits, hanging in dry cleaning bags at the very back, preserved, waiting. I pulled out the grey pearl one. Italian wool. Classic cut. The skirt pressed slightly at the waist. The years do not pass in vain, but when I put on that jacket and felt the shoulders square up, I stood differently. I breathed differently. I did my makeup deliberately. Not too much. Enough to erase the face of a victim. Terracotta lips. Mascara to harden the eyes. I put in my solid gold earrings. The heavy ones. The ones that reminded my ears with their weight that every gram had been earned by me. I threw away the 3 leches cake. The entire thing. Untouched, into the garbage bin on the street. I got into a taxi and rode to Ernesto's office feeling lighter than I had in years. We spent 4 hours working. We revoked the power of attorney before the notary. We drafted a formal letter to the bank requesting a forensic audit of my accounts for suspicious movements and a preventive block on any financial instrument linked to third parties. "Are you sure about this, Margarita?" Ernesto asked while the notary pressed his seal into the revocation. "When this hits the public registry and your daughter gets notified, it's going to be war." I looked at my signature on that paper. Angular. Decisive. Alive. "They fired first, Ernesto," I said. "I'm just stacking the sandbags." That evening came Julian to my door. He rang the bell at 9 o'clock, disheveled, eyes red, none of the arrogance of Sunday anywhere to be found. Through the safety chain I watched him, and for one moment the part of me that had rocked him as a baby wanted to open the door and hold him. But then I remembered the audit report that had arrived by email that same night. The report that showed something far darker than stolen vacation money. 2 years ago, when I sold an industrial plot of land, I had deposited the proceeds into a fixed-term investment fund. My retirement cushion. Untouchable, or so I believed. The fund had been liquidated early. 6 months ago. The penalty for early withdrawal had been enormous, nearly 20%. And the remaining money had been transferred to a company called Inversions CNR. Clara. Roberto. My own daughter had used the power of attorney I signed in a moment of vulnerability to steal my entire liquid capital. My 40 years of work. My safety net. And then she had continued to ask me for grocery money while millions of my pesos sat in her ghost company. Through the chain I looked at Julian, this boy who had mocked my stories, who had humiliated me at my own table, who was now at my door begging for cash because his card no longer worked. "Grandma, I need money. In cash. Please." "A friend's car," I hid it, "they're threatening to call the police." I looked into his eyes. Red. Lying. There was no car accident. There was the desperation of an addict, or a gambling debtor, or simply a boy who had never been told no. "I don't have cash here," I said gently. "You know everything's at the bank, and those machines have been acting strange." "You always have money hidden in your cookie tins," he shouted, hitting the door with his palm. "You always have cash somewhere. Give me whatever you have." The blow against my door echoed in my chest. It was the final confirmation. There was no grandson standing there. There was a parasite demanding blood. "Go home, Julian," I said, and for just one moment I let the steel show through the silk. "Go to sleep. Tomorrow everything will be sorted out." I closed the door. I heard him hit it once more, shout a muffled curse, then kick over one of my ceramic flower pots. The sound of it shattering on my front step was the period at the end of a chapter. Wednesday morning I put on a black power suit I had not worn since my ex-husband's funeral. I pulled my hair into a tight chignon. I painted my lips dark red, almost the color of dried blood. When I looked in the mirror, the grandmother was gone. Margarita Lanes was there instead. The woman who once put a gold watch on a table to challenge a man who did not believe in her. Clara picked me up at 8. She chattered nervously the entire drive, wrapping her theft in words like investment and your future, and Roberto was handling everything. I let her talk. I let her build her house of cards. I stored each lie like ammunition. At the bank, in the glass-walled office of the branch manager, She laid out her case with practiced authority. Her copy of the power of attorney hit the desk with the confidence of someone who believes they hold all the cards. My accounts were blocked, she explained. Her mother was confused with technology. They needed everything unblocked immediately. There was a transfer that needed to go through. The manager began typing. His rehearsed smile faded. He leaned closer to his screen. He looked at Clara. He looked at me. "Dona Margarita," he said slowly, and this time he looked at me the way you look at someone you respect. "The system shows that yesterday afternoon, a full revocation of powers of attorney was recorded before Notary number 45, along with a formal request for a forensic audit for suspected fraud." The silence in that glass room was total. Clara's hand froze above the desk. She turned toward me in slow motion, the color draining from her face beneath her makeup until she looked like a painting left in the rain. "What?" she whispered. "That's impossible. You were at home. Your knee." I opened my bag. The metal clasp snapped open like the hammer of a gun being cocked. "My knee is fine, Clara," I said, and my voice filled every corner of that glass room without me raising it even slightly. "And I am not confused about technology." I placed the manila envelope on the desk. "Inside you will find the audit notice my lawyer is presenting to the prosecutor's office this morning, along with the bank statements showing the transfer of my retirement fund to Inversion's CNR. I paused. Clara. Roberto. Cute name for a shell company. The blow landed. I watched it hit her body physically. She shrank, folded, seemed to lose an inch of height in her chair. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Then the hysteria broke through. She stood up so fast her chair scraped backward across the floor. "You're crazy," she shouted, and heads turned beyond the glass. "You're senile. You don't know what you're saying. That money was an investment. We were growing it for you, for your future." "Sit down, Clara." I did not shout. I used the tone I reserved for suppliers who tried to sell me rusted steel. The tone of the boss. She did not sit. But she stopped shouting. "You called my stories boring," I said, holding her gaze. "Julian said no one wanted to hear them. You both forgot one important detail." I stood, smoothing my skirt. "Those boring stories are the ones that filled the accounts you emptied. That tedious work ethic, 20 hours a day, is what paid for your house, your car, and your son's arrogance." I turned to the manager. "Freeze all linked accounts. Block any transfers to my daughter or her husband. And I want to know the location of every single centavo that is missing." "Of course, Dona Margarita," he said, with a reverence I had not heard directed at me in years. "The bank will cooperate fully." Clara collapsed back into her chair, face in her hands, sobbing loudly now. "How are you going to get home?" she managed through the crying. "I drove you here." "I have money for a taxi," I said, hanging my bag over my shoulder. "My money. Which works perfectly because I am the one who puts it there." I walked to the office door and paused with my hand on the frame. "Tell Roberto the party is over. And tell Julian that if he wants gas money, he should start walking. It will build character." I walked out through the bank's main floor, feeling every eye in that room tracking me, and this time the looks were not pity. They were awe. Outside, the sun hit my face like an applause. The aftermath was surgical and thorough. Ernesto dismantled their fiction piece by piece. Faced with the fraud documentation, Clara and Roberto signed over everything rather than face criminal charges. The vacation house. The luxury vehicles. The club memberships. Roberto cried in Ernesto's office. He begged. Ernesto did not offer him a tissue. I traveled. I went to Italy and drove a convertible through Tuscany, alone, with the windows down and the cypress trees blurring past. I ate handmade pasta in villages where nobody knew my name or my history. I sat in front of the Duomo in Florence with a notebook on my lap and understood something I had been too busy to understand before. My solitude was not punishment. It was peace. It was mine. When I returned, I created the Lanes Foundation, a microcredit and mentorship program for women over 50 who found themselves suddenly alone, suddenly starting over. I taught them what I knew: how to negotiate with hard men, how to read the fine print, how to spot a trap in a contract. Never sign anything without reading every word, I told them, tapping the desk with my emerald ring, the one I bought myself in Venice. And never, ever hand your power to another person. Not even your own blood. Money is freedom, and freedom cannot be delegated. They listened to me with their whole bodies. In their eyes I found what I had searched for uselessly at my dining room table: respect, recognition, family, built not from blood but from courage. Clara came back a year later. Thinner, cheaper clothes, hair gone grey at the roots. Roberto had left when the money disappeared. She stood in my office doorway on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, and I could see that the performance was over. There was nothing left in her but a real person, stripped of everything she had used to hide. "Forgive me," she said. "I'm alone. I'm in a tiny apartment. I don't know what I was thinking." I looked at her for a long moment. "I forgive you, Clara," I said. "I forgive you because holding hatred costs me energy I'd rather spend elsewhere. But forgiveness doesn't mean you get the keys back. It means you're free to go build your own life. You have your health. You have your hands. You have the degree I paid for. Use it. Work. Struggle. Get up the way I got up." I stood. "I have a meeting with my partners. Goodbye." She left crying. I watched her walk away through the glass wall of my office, past the women bent over their business plans, and I felt something quiet and complete settle in my chest. I heard later that she found work in real estate. That Julian finished his studies at a public university, paying his own way, and became quieter, more serious, like a man who finally understood what the world costs. Maybe someday they'll come back to my door with clean hands and healed hearts. Maybe I'll open it. But not today. Today I am 73 years old and I wake up every morning with a reason. I am a businesswoman, a traveler, a mentor. I am the owner of my time and my story. Some nights I pour a glass of wine and sit in the garden and look up at the stars. And I think about that grey Sunday, the laughter, the contempt, the fork clattering against the plate. It was the most painful day of my life. It was also the day I was reborn. The humiliation was the chisel. And the woman it carved out of me, the real one, the fierce one, the free one, she had been waiting inside all along. So if you are sitting at a table right now where no one hears your stories, where you feel invisible, where you are treated like furniture, listen to me. Don't be afraid to be the difficult one. The stubborn one. The one they call crazy. Be afraid of only one thing: being the rug.